To discuss our divorce, I took my ex-wife to a fancy restaurant. She loudly told the waiter, "He can only afford this dinner because I'm taking everything." I just smiled and said, "She's right." The owner then came out, shook my hand, and told her, "Ma'am, he can't afford it because he owns this place." Her bill would not be free, and it was just the start of... My name is Marcus Thorne. I am 42 years old, and I manage complex logistical operations for a major shipping company in New York City. My job requires extreme precision, compartmentalization, and the ability to operate successfully while remaining unnoticed. This ability to hide my true value became my greatest weapon. I met Alara 10 years ago. She was 40, working as an image consultant, and utterly consumed by the pursuit of status. She was beautiful, high energy, and carried the effortless air of someone who belonged at the top of every social ladder. I provided the stability and the steady, large paycheck. She provided the social calendar and the demanding aesthetic. The core of our conflict was contempt for my career. Alara loved the money my operations management job provided, but she detested the lack of glamour. She would frequently tell me I was wasting my talent on boring spreadsheets and shipping containers. She believed my lack of ambition was the only thing holding her back from true, high society wealth. I let her believe my operational job was my entire source of income. What she didn't know was that I had used my logistical expertise and careful savings to quietly invest in, and eventually purchase, a controlling stake in 3 highly rated, exclusive fine dining restaurants across Manhattan. These establishments, including the one she currently believes is simply fancy, were my hidden financial empire. My day job was my alibi. My restaurants were my true passion and my secret unlisted asset, valued at over $500,000. When the marriage ended 6 months ago, Alara hired the most aggressive divorce attorney in the city, operating under the assumption that my only assets were my retirement fund and the modest apartment we shared. She demanded 60% of everything, arguing that my success was only possible because she had managed the social front. The real problem was her ego. She continually undermined me in public, telling mutual friends that I was financially conservative to the point of being cheap, and that she deserved a massive settlement to compensate for wasting her prime years on a man she felt was beneath her. The final straw came when she insisted on meeting at Le Noir, the most expensive of my 3 hidden restaurants. She wanted to finalize her settlement demands over a lavish meal I supposedly couldn't afford, purely to rub in her perceived victory. I agreed instantly. I knew the moment she stepped inside, she had walked into a beautifully staged trap. The moment Alara suggested we meet at Le Noir, I knew the universe had just handed me the script. Le Noir was known for its dark leather booths, impeccable service, and a wine list that could bankrupt a small country, my favorite of the 3 restaurants I secretly controlled. I immediately called John, the general manager and my most trusted proxy in the city. I explained the situation with clinical detachment. An emergency board meeting was scheduled for the main table at 8 p.m. John, who knew my history with Alara, didn't ask questions. I gave him 3 precise instructions. The service must be flawless, the audio log in booth 4 must be running, and no one, absolutely no one, was to recognize me until I gave the signal. He understood. The manager who would later appear to shake my hand would be John. When I arrived at the restaurant, Alara was already seated in the designated booth 4, already demanding a specific vintage wine, loudly. She looked stunning. Designer dress, jewelry I recognized as cheap costume pieces she wore for show, and a practiced look of weary triumph. "Marcus, you look well," she said, without warmth. "I expected you to be selling off your yacht by now, not affording Le Noir." "I managed," I replied simply, letting her misinterpret my calm as defeat. The entire dinner became her performance. She ordered the most expensive items on the menu, the dry-aged ribeye, the vintage Bordeaux, and continually spoke loudly enough for the surrounding tables to hear her. "Honestly, I'm glad this divorce is happening," she announced to our server, a polite young man named Leo. "I can finally move on with someone who has real potential. Poor Marcus here. He's just so financially cautious. We only managed to keep this apartment because of my consultant money." She was meticulously building her narrative, that she was the victim, the source of our wealth, and the only reason I was sitting in this high-end restaurant was because she hadn't yet taken the money. She then leaned into me, lowering her voice but maintaining eye contact with Leo, the waiter. "This is going to cost you a fortune, Marcus. I hope you saved enough from those spreadsheets." I smiled, a genuine cold smile. She thought she was embarrassing me. She thought she was demonstrating her power to the staff. Instead, she was fulfilling every single condition needed for my planned countersuit: public acknowledgement of financial contempt, malicious intent, and an inflated estimation of her contribution to our assets. I discreetly tapped the table twice, a subtle signal directed at John's observation post. The waiter, Leo, returned with the final, crucial question. "Mr. Thorne, I apologize, but may I confirm the payment method? The total is quite substantial." Elara seized the opportunity instantly. She looked at Leo, then back at me with absolute arrogance. "Don't worry about him," she said loudly. "He can only afford this dinner because I'm taking everything he has in the divorce. He won't have 2 pennies to rub together by next month." I met her eyes. "She's right," I said, my voice clear across the dining room. "She is absolutely right." The waiter, Leo, returned to the table with our desserts, a massive, expensive chocolate torte. He looked nervous as he placed the plates down. "Mr. Thorne, I apologize," Leo said, his voice quiet. "But may I confirm the payment method? The final total is quite substantial." This was the cue. Elara seized the opportunity instantly. She leaned back in her seat, her expensive dress rustling, clearly ready for her closing monologue. "Don't worry about him," she announced, her voice carrying loudly across the half-filled dining room. She wanted everyone to hear her victory. "He can only afford this dinner because I'm taking everything. He won't have 2 pennies to rub together by next month." She delivered the final cruel line with a venomous smile aimed straight at my face. "So just put it on the card, honey." "I'm feeling generous." The waiter looked shocked, his eyes flickering between Elara and me. A few tables nearby fell silent, drawn by the sudden, sharp confrontation. Elara was smug, convinced she had won the audience and the argument. I didn't flinch. I met the waiter's gaze, then I looked directly at Elara, my own smile slow and cold. "She's right," I said, my voice cutting through the silence. "She is absolutely right, Leo. I genuinely cannot afford this dinner." Elara's smile froze, turning brittle. She thought my agreement was a sign of final emotional collapse. She thought she had successfully proven me financially incapable in public. "See?" she hissed, satisfied with my capitulation. "Just process the payment." But I ignored her, maintaining eye contact with the waiter. "However, Leo," I continued, "there's a slight issue. We need to wait for my partner to approve this expense." The waiter, confused by the sudden introduction of a partner, looked toward the kitchen, his hand resting hesitantly on the payment terminal. I discreetly tapped the edge of the table twice, the prearranged signal to John, the manager. Elara was still gloating. "What partner?" "Your mother? No one cares about your spreadsheets, Marcus. Just pay the bill." "My business partner, Elara," I clarified, "the one who handles the major decisions and the high-risk investments." As if on cue, The polished doors to the kitchen swung open. John, the manager, a formidable man in his mid-50s, sharp suit, impeccable manners, walked directly toward our table. He didn't look at Ilara. He walked straight to me. Ilara's jaw tightened, sensing the shift, but she tried one last time to salvage the moment. "John," she announced, "my husband is refusing to pay the bill. He's being ridiculous. You should just comp it." John stopped at our table, ignoring Ilara entirely. He reached across the table, shook my hand firmly, and held my gaze. He then turned slowly to Ilara, his voice professional, but utterly devastating. "Ma'am, Mr. Thorne is correct. He can't afford the dinner because he owns this place." The manager, John, held my gaze as he addressed Ilara. "Ma'am, Mr. Thorne is correct. He can't afford the dinner because he owns this place." The silence was immediate and profound, freezing the motion in the surrounding tables. The truth, delivered calmly by a professional stranger, hung in the air like a death sentence. Ilara's perfect composure shattered instantly. Her jaw dropped, her eyes wide with total disbelief. She looked from John to me and back to John, searching desperately for the smirk that would indicate a joke. "What are you saying?" she finally managed, her voice thin and sharp. "This is ridiculous." "I know the owner. His name is Robert." John maintained his professional demeanor, but his eyes held a distinct lack of pity. "Robert is the head chef, ma'am. Mr. Thorne owns the holding company that employs everyone here, including me. He owns the 3 establishments under the Thorne Hospitality Group." The revelation was met with a ripple of whispers from the nearby tables, people who likely recognized both Ilara and my mundane job title. Ilara's face flushed a deep, painful crimson. The humiliation was absolute. She had publicly boasted about my imminent financial ruin inside my own secret empire. She lunged at John's arm. "You're lying! He's just a shipping manager. He doesn't even wear decent clothes." John stepped back calmly. I leaned forward, my voice low and cutting, ending her attempt at deflection. "I wear clothes I can work in, Ilara. And I own the code that runs the logistical operation that paid for this restaurant." I then addressed the room, not loudly, but clearly enough for the silent tables to hear. My ex-wife assumed that because I was discreet, I was poor. She assumed that because I avoided fights, I was weak. Ilara turned to me, her control collapsing into raw, undignified rage. "You set me up!" she shrieked. "You spent 6 months letting me believe I was taking everything while you hid $500,000. "I didn't hide anything," I corrected, my tone surgical. "I simply compartmentalized my assets, a practice you mocked. You were too busy calculating my visible paycheck to notice the value of my hidden cash flow." I then looked at Leo, the waiter, who was standing wide-eyed beside the table. "Leo, please confirm the total amount of the check for Miss Cole." Leo, shaking slightly, read the number aloud. I pulled out my wallet, placed a $100 bill on the table for Leo's excellent service, and looked at Ilara. "You wanted to know if I could afford it. I could, but I won't. That check, Ilara, is the price of your contempt." "Her bill will not be free," I affirmed to John, who nodded once, a clear signal of solidarity. The shock of John's announcement, that I owned the restaurant, was like a physical blow to Ilara. Her face, moments ago flushed with arrogant triumph, was now a mask of pure, desperate rage. She lunged across the booth, aiming not for the check, but for me. "You snake! You lying bastard!" she shrieked, her voice echoing through the stunned dining room. "You hid this from me. You played me for a fool. I didn't move." John, the manager, stepped calmly between us, his body language professional and firm. "Ma'am, I must ask you to lower your voice. This is a private matter. We need to settle the check. Ilara ignored him, her eyes burning into mine. You brought me to your own restaurant just to humiliate me. You're sick, Marcus. You chose the location, Ilara, I countered, my voice calm, maintaining my professional exterior. You chose to belittle me publicly. I merely chose to clarify the ownership structure. She turned back to John, her tone shifting instantly into one of entitled demand. Comp the bill. You have to comp it. I don't care if he owns the place. I'm his wife. I shouldn't have to pay. John simply shook his head, his tone devoid of emotion. You are Mr. Thorne's ex-wife as of the divorce filing, ma'am. And per Mr. Thorne's direct instruction, her bill will not be free. That was the line that truly broke her. The full weight of the lavish dinner she had ordered, the expensive wine, the dry-aged meats, the luxurious desserts, landed squarely on her own credit card. She had spent wildly, convinced the entire expense would be a final, meaningless poke at my cautious budget. She produced her card, her hands shaking so violently she could barely hold the payment terminal. The terminal whirred, then delivered a silent, final verdict. Declined. The public humiliation reached its peak. She looked around the room, pleading with strangers for sympathy. He's cutting me off. He's trying to ruin me. He's leaving me with nothing. I leaned into the booth, speaking only to her, ensuring no one else could hear the final, cold truth. You wanted to take everything I earned, Ilara. You wanted to prove my value was zero. Now the tables have turned. That bill is yours, and you can't afford it, because you've relied on me for every financial decision for the last 5 years. Robert and Diane, a couple from a neighboring table who recognized Ilara, stood up, whispering to each other with open judgment. Ilara had ruined her image in the exact environment she prized the most. I pulled a single business card from my wallet, not for the restaurant, but for a local taxi company. I placed it beside her unpaid check. You have 20 minutes to call your lawyer, find a secondary card, and settle the debt, I said, my voice sharp. Otherwise, John will call the appropriate authorities for failure to render payment. She stared at the taxi card, the finality of the situation washing over her. She had lost the argument, the reputation, and now the last piece of her self-control. I stood, gave John a curt nod of thanks, and walked out, leaving Ilara alone in the expensive restaurant, forced to reckon with the wreckage of her own arrogance. I didn't wait for Ilara to resolve the unpaid bill. I gave John a final nod, a confirmation that I had seen enough, and walked out of the restaurant. The cool night air of Manhattan felt sharp and clean against my skin, washing away the heat of the conflict. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt profoundly exhausted and focused. Ilara's public humiliation was complete, but the divorce itself was still pending. I needed to transform her arrogant moment of public failure into an airtight legal advantage. The next morning, I was in my lawyer's office, not to discuss the previous night's theatrical revenge, but to finally reveal the full scope of my financial life. My lawyer, Vivian, sat across from me, a legal pad open. Marcus, we need your full disclosure now, she said. Ilara is basing her claim on your known salary and the apartment equity. If there are hidden assets, we need to know how to shield them. I smiled, pulling a heavy file from my briefcase, the one marked Thorne Hospitality Group. There are no hidden assets, Vivian. There are only highly compartmentalized assets. The restaurant where we had dinner last night, Le Noir, is one of them. Vivian paused, pen hovering over the paper. You mean you're a minority investor? No. I own the building, the operations, and 2 other successful concepts through the holding company. The total value, including the real estate holdings tied to the restaurants, is conservatively estimated at just under $3 million. Vivian lowered her pen slowly, staring at me with a mixture of professional awe and utter disbelief. She had spent 6 months fighting based on the premise that my net worth was low 6 figures. "You let her believe you were a shipping logistics manager?" Vivian asked. "My logistics business is my day job and my alibi. It keeps me anonymous. The restaurants are the reward for years of saving and strategic investing." The look on Vivian's face confirmed Ilara's total miscalculation. Ilara had valued me at a fraction of my worth, ensuring her claim for a massive settlement would be based on a flawed, minimized financial picture. "Ilara valued the marital estate at about $600,000, Vivian mused. "She is about to realize she was suing a man who could buy her lawyer's firm outright." We immediately filed an amended asset declaration, overwhelming Ilara's team with proof of my true net worth. The purpose wasn't to fight. It was to terrify. Furthermore, I confirmed with John that Ilara had been forced to use a secondary credit card that failed, and the restaurant had to temporarily cover the cost before Ilara's parents ultimately settled the debt. I used the incident to strengthen my countersuit, citing her public financial instability and potential credit fraud as evidence of her incapacity to manage funds, a move that would legally dismantle her demands for alimony. Ilara wanted to destroy my reputation with contempt. I chose to destroy her leverage with cold, unassailable financial reality. The lawsuit crumbled quickly after Vivian filed the amended asset declaration. Ilara's team realized they were fighting a multi-million-dollar holding company, not a single salary. She was forced to withdraw her suit, realizing that continuing would only expose her to catastrophic punitive damages and potential fraud charges. The judge dismissed her case with prejudice. The verdict was final and devastating. Ilara received no alimony, and the modest apartment was awarded fully to me, paid for primarily by my premarital funds. The years she spent mocking my spreadsheet job had cost her every single cent she was hoping to gain. The public fallout was immediate and absolute in her small, status-obsessed world. The story of her public humiliation at Le Noir, where she boasted about taking everything only to have the owner appear, became instant social poison. Her professional reputation as an image consultant was destroyed. Who would hire a consultant who so spectacularly misjudged the true net worth of her own husband? Clients quickly canceled contracts, unwilling to be associated with her financial volatility. Ilara was left completely isolated. She lost the apartment, she lost her primary income, and she lost the only social circle that mattered to her. Her strategy of marrying up and then suing for comfort had imploded entirely due to her profound contempt. I executed the final, strategic move without fanfare. I didn't keep the 3 restaurants, which demanded too much operational time. I quietly liquidated my shares in the Thorn Hospitality Group to John and my other partners for a significant sum. The money was secured, clean, and completely separate from my divorce proceedings. I didn't need the empire anymore. I only needed the proof that I could build it. I sold the apartment we shared and moved to a spacious, quiet home in upstate New York. I still maintained my logistics job, focusing on the calm, predictable routines I enjoyed. The complexity of the system no longer involved managing her lies. The peace I found wasn't just the absence of conflict, it was the profound certainty of self-worth. Ilara thought she was marrying a man she could take from. She was actually marrying a man who could afford to let her take nothing. I never saw her again, but I heard she was forced to move back in with her parents, living on the meager income of her old part-time job. Her dreams of luxury had vanished, replaced by the reality of the debts she had secretly incurred. I often thought about the finality of that night at Le Noir. She chose to use contempt as her weapon. I chose to use truth and hidden capability as mine. And in the end, she paid the full price of the dinner. and the full price of underestimating me.